Welcome to the third edition of Productronica Web TV, the magazine of the world's leading trade fair for innovative electronics production. Today, centre stage are coil winding, cables and connectors. Without these three components, energy turnaround would not be feasible, for example. This sustainable energy requires an efficient drive technology.
Setzt eine effiziente Antriebstechnik voraus. Ohne Wickelgüter gäbe es zum Beispiel.
Without coil winding, there would be no drives for generators, wind turbines or electric mobility. This here is the drive for an e-bike, for example. And coil winding can be found in everyday life things, sometimes even where one would never expect it. Coil winding. Without it, aircraft could not fly. Trains could not operate. There would be no hydropower stations and no robots. In short, coil winding are spools which can produce or detect a magnetic field. They are part of electronic components such as 2- or 4-wheel electric vehicles. We're in the middle of the special show of coil winding manufacturing. Here we see the entire value creation chain from the raw material to the finished product. I'll simply take you with me on a tour. Our first stop is a wire coating machine. Here, for example, a copper wire gets painted and isolated. This is important to ensure the magnetic function of an electric motor. This is how the finished coated and insulated wires look, ranging from very thin wires up to much thicker ones. They must also withstand enormous loads.
Zu deutlich dickeren Drähten. Außerdem müssen sie enormen Belastungen standhalten. Nicht nur die Drähte sind für die
Not only the wires are necessary for the function of coil winding, but so is the electrical insulation system. How this interaction is tested we will see on our next stop at Sinflex. Hi Mr. Svaghofen, what are you testing here exactly? This is our so-called seal tube test. In this test, the compatibility of products with each other which are used in an electro-regulier system is tested. And how is this test carried out? Here you can see this glass bulb. All the materials that come into this electrical insulation system come into the bulb. This bulb is then put into a furnace, kept for a long time at a temperature, and through outgassing of the plastics, etc., what happens with the enamelled copper wire is tested. Why is the test so important? Because this enamelled copper wire must not be destroyed or the motor would short circuit. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Svaghofen. Before we continue our tour of the special show, we'll show you what's new with the topic of cables and connectors. High-tech cables and innovative connectors. They play an important role in the coming energy turnaround. Sustainability and energy efficiency are the buzzwords of the electro-technical sector. At Productronica, exhibitors present the latest innovations. They must be small. The automotive industry calls for the smallest possible components in the new CO2 regulations and the increasing packing density in automotive applications. The answer from TE Connectivity is the Nano MQS connector for contacting signal power applications in the car. The small connectors have minimum space requirements with a grid spacing of 1.8 mm and a distance between rows of 1.5 mm. This is also a great advantage for the production of connectors. The production of Nano MQS connectors requires a lot less energy on the one hand, and on the other hand, the material consumption in the production of housing is much lower. The customer is looking for delicate connectors, in other words, the smallest possible lightweight cables. That is the forte of the fully automated assembly line Zeta 633 from Comax Wire. In addition to the classic diameters, it also processes very thin cable. This miniaturization of cable harnesses is driven primarily by the fact that there is more and more cable in a car, but at the same time one wants to save weight, so the energy efficiency can be increased by our thin cable. Solder with low energy consumption and still achieve a great performance. The selective soldering machine Airsa EcoCell saves power when heating the solder. Instead of 200 to 300 kilograms, the machine warms only 11 kilograms for processing individual construction elements. The manufacturer, Kurz Airsa, feels a responsibility to make all manufacturing components energy efficient.
Wir betrachten das unter dem Gesichtspunkt.
We look at this from the point of view of blue competence of the VDMA, to which we adhere right from the beginning of the machine design to the procurement of items through to power consumption in the day-to-day use of the machine. The goal is to consume as little energy as possible. Blue competence means making manufacturing sustainable and energy efficient. The electronics manufacturing industry presents solutions at Productronica 2013. We're back at the special show. I'm standing here at a so-called linear coil winding machine, on which the electromagnetic components for drives and engines are manufactured. Let's look at this machine in operation. To do this, I press the start button.
Drücke ich den Startknopf. So this has now been coil winded. Let's have a look. With me is Bastian Knoop from the manufacturer Aumann. Mr. Knoop, what was coil winded here? It's a so-called single tooth. The tooth is installed as a start gate, the driving element in the electric motor. And what's special about it? Raw material savings are possible. We save on copper and laminations. The devices become more compact. Potential savings of up to 30% are not uncommon. Thank you, Mr. Knoop. Let's now look at the quintessence of this process, the finished product. Prozesskette an, nämlich das fertige Produkt.
The finished product, in this case an electric motor as is used, for example, to drive electric vehicles, with coil winding, cables and connectors. And here we end this little tour of this special show. That's all from Productronica Web TV. Thanks for watching. The next Productronica will take place in 2 years. Until then, goodbye. Why don't you take me with you on a tour? It's important to electrify the electric-magnetic function of an electric motor.
Zur renovationellen Leittechnik der Venomationen. Auf der Productronica sind erste Die nächste Productronica findet in 2 Jahren statt und wir sind auch wieder da.
Back to the studio.